That 3, the developer agrees to install a perimeter fence between their property and the abutting properties, and to install landscape screening such as arborvitaes between the fence and property line. Though these are normally done at the ZBA level, the LIP process escalates the process because by voting for an agreement, the selectmen and town manager are committing the town to not only advocate for, but to be proponents of this project. You're literally saying to the outside world, we want this project, and no number of legal disclaimers about independence, etc., in the agreement will negate the impact the message your signature sends to the boards, commissions, and staff that are appointed by the board and town manager. Not only that, but once you are in for a penny, you're in for a pound. There are no takebacks once this agreement is signed and sent to the state. So you need to make sure that the agreement is truly above and beyond what the town would get out of the normal 40B process. With respect to what the town is getting from this agreement, in my view, it falls quite short. The fact is that 40B is not a license to ignore all rules and requirements. Developers are still required to meet state and federal standards for roadway design, building design, fire code, stormwater management, wetlands, etc., and reasonably mitigate negative impacts on these systems as it relates to safety. Towns throughout the state extract, through the normal 40B process, more mitigation than this agreement provides. The only thing that this agreement provides that would otherwise not be included through due diligence during a normal 40B process is payment to the town of $20,000 a year over 5 years for recreation programs. But even that language is problematic, as it does not kick in until after full occupancy. But since quote-unquote full is not defined, it will be interpreted to be 100% of the units occupied. That is far outside the control of the town, and as most large property owners will tell you, at least one unit is typically unoccupied in these size developments. Most communities will either tie it to the issuance of a certificate of occupancy or set a lower threshold of 50% or 75%, since that is more of a realistic bar to meet than 100%. In my mind, the promise of $20,000 payment that may never be realized is not worth a yes vote. There's no doubt that Auburn and Central Massachusetts, like the rest of the state, are in vital need of more housing, especially a wide variety of affordable units from 100% affordable to workforce housing and everything in between. But these projects must be well thought out, buildable, and context sensitive to surrounding environments. I am in full support of these types of projects, but to date, this is not one of them. So in summary, I would ask that you not vote tonight, but instead tell the developer that if he wants the board, the town manager, and essentially the town to be a proponent in this project, he must, 1, provide plans and calculations to demonstrate that the proposed raising of the road to move out of the floodplain was in fact buildable and would not negatively impact the butters as it relates to stormwater management. And if it did, to commit to mitigating it regardless of the cost. 2, provide a traffic impact assessment report to demonstrate that the proposed development would not negatively impact the safety and access of all roadway users on the local roadway network. And if it did, to commit to mitigating it regardless of the cost. 3, agree to install a perimeter fence between their property and abutting properties and to install landscape screening between the fence and the property line. 4, agree to changing the $20,000 payment to be per year for 5 years following issuance of a certificate of occupancy, or at least a lower threshold such as 50%. Make it true affordable housing project with committals on a certain number of units with varying percentages of AMI. If they won't do that, then they are not really trying to be a good partner, and it can stay a normal 40B where the town can do their due diligence and likely get the same things for them, minus the small $20,000 payout. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crane. All right, moving on to public hearings presentations, we have agenda item 3A, the Town of Auburn Cable Television License Renewal, public hearing. And do we have a motion to open the hearing?
So moved.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Do we have a presenter?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Bill, I just want to make sure you can hear us, correct?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Thank you. Just a brief introduction. So attorney Bill August, who is representing the town, is participating remotely. I want to acknowledge and I want to send out a special thank you to members of the Cable Advisory Committee. I know Bill Schiebler is here. Other members, Aaron Keys, Jeffrey Magny, Doug Nelson, and Alyssa Ryan. Thank you for all your hard work. The committee voted to recommend and approve the license agreement and send it to the board for your consideration tonight. So with that, I want to invite up Bill and any other members that may have some comments, and I think you have an opening statement to read, Mr. Chairman?
For the motion? Oh, yes. Okay, good evening. Welcome to the Town of Auburn's public hearing on the cable license renewal of Spectrum Northeast LLP, also known as Charter Communications. Notice of this hearing was in local newspapers 2 successive weeks. Copies of the legal advertisements are here entered into the hearing record as ascertainment hearing exhibits 1 and 2. The proposed charter renewal license, as recommended by the Cable Advisory Committee, and which has been available for the public inspection at the clerk's office, is entered as Exhibit 3. We note for the public, this hearing follows an earlier public hearing at which members of the public and interested persons submitted public comments on the town's renewal needs. Based on information before us this evening, and based on prior public testimony and a prior public hearing included in the advisory committee's recommendation of approval, the Board of Selectmen may take final action on and approve or reject the renewal proposal before us this evening. Public comments, if any, as well as questions to Charter should be directed through me, and I will rule whether they are in order. Please keep your comments no longer than 4 minutes. Before proceeding, I would like to recognize Bill Scheibler? Scheibler, my apologies. Chairman of the Cable Advisory Committee, and Chris Hugo, and other cable committee members for their diligence and hard work on the renewal process, which has been very important and helpful to the town. Thank you. At this time, I will accept comments from the public, if any. Yes, sir. If you could just state your name and address for the record,
Hi,
sir.
my name is Russell Talisman. I live at 175 Oxford Street in Auburn. My questions are on a couple. I do have Spectrum Charter for TV, cable, and phone. I'm very, very satisfied with the phone because there's competition, and my rates are wonderful. In my bill, I'm going to have another argument with Spectrum because my bill every year goes up by a certain percentage because they cater to the new clients. They don't really care about people that have been with them for a long time and pay their bills on time. Now, I'm 70 years old, so I'm wondering if there's anywhere possible that maybe senior citizens and maybe veterans can get some kind of a break on it instead of every year I gotta cry and complain for my TV and my cable. Can you please give me some kind of peace of mind? Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill wants to be recognized.
Yes, Mr. August, or Attorney August, excuse me.
Right. Russell, I didn't catch the last name. The speaker is in good company. Many share that frustration. Legally, Congress deregulated rates, unfortunately. So, to the extent there was any vestigial rate regulation of BASIC a few years ago, that was removed by FCC rate deregulation proceedings. So at the local level, there is no jurisdiction over the rates. In terms of the senior citizen discount question, we implored Charter to give us a senior citizen discount clause. I've represented, by the way, it's good to be back. I'm been counsel to Auburn. This is, I think, my third time, Ed, right? Like going back 10 years, then 20 years. In the old days, the prior owner of Charter, it was a different company, Greater Media, used to do a senior citizen discount clause for needs-based, based on income eligibility criteria. The new charter, which was the result of a merger with Time Warner and under completely different corporate ownership, does not do senior citizen discounts anywhere. It's like a firm corporate national policy. So unfortunately, in terms of the area of rates, Congress has set up a framework to make it very just rate deregulated. This goes back several years. That's all I have to say on rates.
Okay, if I have one more reply, if I may.
Yeah.
This sounds very confusing because every year when all my rates go up, my internet's going up this month by $25 and my television is going up by $35. So when I get the next bill, I get on the telephone, I cry, I complain, I threaten to go streaming and leave. I talk to this manager, and then I get a more reasonable rate. Why do I
Right.
have to go through that?
Right.
And I don't care about Congress says this. It's corporate, it's political, I get it. But, you know, I'm running out of mojo.
Right. I've been knocking my head against the same wall because we've been in the State House and working on different fronts to try to have some modicum of reasonable rate regulation. So they just leave it, as I said. If were the town to attempt to use its authority to impose a different framework over the rates, the town would be in violation of the statute that the technical term is we're preempted. So we would be, we're not able to get to that point. So it's left to people and what they call market forces. You're calling and imploring them. That's supposedly a marketplace, and there you go. That's beyond the cable licensing process. The scope of cable licensing and renewal, with the deregulation of rates and the deregulation of program lineup, is to negotiate the allocation of resources to some of the local facilities. That was sort of the grand bargain where Congress said, you guys, the companies will be out of the rate regulation, but the municipalities can require local facilities. So the town negotiated for 3 Auburn-specific channels, which we saw in the pandemic were very valuable. It's a unique source of local information, community information. The renewal license continues the 3 channels. The bottom line on the renewal license, just for the benefit of the public, is, you have these 3 channels. I mean, those are a very, very valuable resource. If you were to put a market value on 3 TV channels in basic service and expanded service, those are worth either hundreds of thousands or millions. So you're getting a resource, and the negotiations with the help of very helpful, I have to thank Bill Schiebler and Chris Hugo and the committee, and Ed, the town manager, and Julie, the predecessor, focused on getting assurances about the continuity of the 3 channels. And we did get a financial commitment to actually increase slight increase in the percentage that goes to the local channels. It went up from 4.5% to 5% in this renewal. And that gives some longevity to your Auburn community television channels. We have the operating budget secured for another 10 years. And it's hard, right now, it's hard to get that much more out of, that's actually the cap, 5%, and they went up to the cap. So that was the focus of most of the negotiations. Also, we incorporated a lot of customer service guidelines and protections in terms of there's a whole slew of federal customer protection, telephone response time, notices, reporting, giving customers procedures to dispute bills, and complaint processing, and we've incorporated those as well as very comprehensive, the regular right-of-way management, umbrella insurance, and restoration of right-of-ways. So in addition to the local channels, we were very sensitive to the real nuts and bolts of cable franchising, which I've been doing, forever with the town and many other municipalities.
Okay, if I may again.
Sorry, you have to go, everything has to go through me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
We're limited to 4
But I
minutes. This
disagree
one
with you.
public comment's been well longer than that. And I do empathize with your situation. I just don't know that this is the proper vehicle for rates at this point.
There's no competition.
Absolutely, I
They
agree.
were invited.
Competition.
Nobody wants to come in and set up, it's a lot of money to set up a cable system.
Oh, wait, let me say that's so important. May I say one thing? The license is non-exclusive. So when you say there's competition in telephone, there could be license competition in cable. I'm so glad you just mentioned that no one will come in. This license is explicitly non-exclusive. If there were a competitor, like Verizon came into some communities years ago, this license opens the door. We could give them the red carpet treatment. So the lack of competition has nothing to do with the document. It's explicitly non-exclusive. Just no one is willing to show up right now and apply for a license.
Thank you. That makes sense.
Any further public comment? Okay. Did you have anything to?
Well, not really, the prices are set by the state, so whenever Charter wants to raise their prices, they have to go through the Department of Telecommunication, and they approve it, similar to electric rates, things like that, so if you want to complain, that's the agency to complain to.
Yep.
And we do have that address on our page on the town's website.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any questions from the board members on the license agreement renewal?
Let me just footnote one thing. The state regulation was only a basic service, but none of the tiers above that. And most of the subscribers buy up through a higher level. So it ends up being like a shell game because most of everything else, like where all the action is, the expanded basic, is beyond the state oversight.
Thank you. Do we have a motion to close the hearing?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And do we have a motion? I have the motion if anybody would like to.
I guess I will read it.
Okay.
Unless Sarah wants to. She looks like
Hi,
she's
do
ready.
you want me to? Finding that the cable franchise renewal proposal of Spectrum Northeast LLP, also known as Charter Communication, reasonably meets the franchise and cable-related renewal needs and interests of the town and of the public and the town of Auburn, and finding that Spectrum's financial and technical qualifications and mobile programming channels, facilities, and services are reasonable to meet the town's cable franchise needs. And in accordance with the recommendations of the Town of Auburn Cable Committee in favor of Select Board approval of the Spectrum renewal license, I move that the Select Board, as a statutory cable license issuing authority for the town, vote to accept and approve the renewal license agreement with Spectrum effective April 10th, 2023, and execute the renewal license. Can't read today.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Does the board wish to sign this now?
Yeah, we can sign that now.
Thank you. I'm going to sign up, but I want to just underscore that I wasn't just saying it as a nicety when I say that Ed and Julie, who just left, you're very fortunate because you have a very supportive staff. When we would call in with any question or scheduling or language, they're just always there. And Sharon and Chris Hugo and Bill, incredibly supportive team, and it made life a lot easier. Thank you very much, all.
Thank you, Attorney August.
Yep.
Just one?
Just one, please, just one. Yeah.
All right, moving on to Select Board general items. So agenda item 5A, we have the one-day liquor license application by the Knights of Columbus. Neary Council for the Night at Races charity event on April 22nd at St. Joseph's Church. So you should have the applications in your packets, and some comments from DCG. You could have a seat up here if you'd want, sir.
I'd rather not.
You could- or the podium, whichever you prefer.
Is it okay?
Yeah, it's fine.
It's easier to stand up. I had my hips redone 8 weeks ago, so
Oh, jeez,
it's wonderful. Everybody should try it. My name is Joseph Butler. You know my address too? 18
Yes,
Marion
please.
Avenue, Auburn, Mass.
Thank you.
After a 3-year hiatus, we're trying to do our Night at the Races fundraiser again. And for you guys that weren't on the board in 19, we basically set up a dinner, then we set up some fake horse racing. We have 6 races, we have raffles, and we have a lottery board and stuff like that to raise money. Half the money goes to scholarships for Auburn seniors, and the other half goes to charities.
Excellent.
And so we do drink beer and wine. Well, so that's why we need the liquor license.
All right,
To
very
make
good.
A few extra dollars for the kids.
Do we have any questions from the board members? No? Any questions from town administration?
Mr. Chairman, I reviewed the application and the comments of the DCG. I have no issues with this right now.
Excellent. And with that, do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the license, subject to our normal verbiage.
Absolutely. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? It is a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we waive the fee for the one-day license.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote.
Thank
Thank
you,
you very
guys.
much, sir. Best of luck at the event. All right, moving on, we have the seasonal open air license on town property, the Auburn Junior Women's Club for the annual duck race fundraiser at the Auburn Library.
My name is Mary Slawowski, and I live at 16 Whitman Bailey Drive in Auburn, and I'm also the treasurer of the Auburn Women Junior Women's Club. And we're going to sell ducks at the library on May the 13th, if we're allowed, and then the duck race is going to be on May 29th after the parade on the grounds of the library.
It's a great event every year.
Yeah, so.
All right, do we have any questions from board members? Okay, town administration?
No questions.
All right, seeing none, do we have a motion?
Motion, we approve the license, subject to our usual verbiage.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we waive the fee.
Absolutely.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Thank you
you.
very much. All right, moving on to Agenda 5C, we have the May 2nd, 2022 Annual Town Meeting Warrant. That's for the board to vote on recommendations for the annual warrant articles.
Mr. Chairman, would you entertain a motion to move up item 6B?
6B, I absolutely would. I do, so we have some officers here in the back.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, moving to agenda item 6B, that is the grant to request vote to authorize application, accept and expend federal grant funds from the 2023 COPS hiring program for 4 additional patrol officers. And I see we have Mr. Lemon and Mr. Mills. Good evening.
The Deputy Chief's going to run the PowerPoint presentation.
Absolutely.
Through the chair, I'd like to publicly thank Mr. Corain for his kind comments, and I appreciate that. So briefly, while Deputy Chief Mills sets up the PowerPoint presentation, when we had budgetary and financial discussions with the town manager earlier this year, I had brought some of my requests and concerns with regards to staffing in the police department. And I've been around long enough where I can walk you through some of the history. But I ran some quick stats just for this year, just to kind of talk about it, to give the board a better understanding of how the police department runs and what we run operationally and what we run administratively. So since January 1st, this was just run earlier today, our dispatchers have taken more than 6,700 calls this year, we've had a banner year. It's been very busy. The officers made 92 arrests. They've charged another 84 people by summons. We have written more than 395 reports of all different types. Our Detective Bureau have written numerous search warrants and had an unprecedented year with 10 sudden deaths in town. I attribute a lot of that to substance abuse and the opioid problems. Our office has written more than 120 crash reports, not including the minor paper exchanges to help with people with, and all of our traffic officers and patrol officers have written almost 500 citations this year. Over the weekend, we had a pedestrian crash. It was a very busy weekend. We had multiple arrests at the mall, and we had a very serious pedestrian crash on Southbridge Street, and that quickly dries up our resources. The afternoon shift couldn't even answer any other calls. We were able to get some assistance from Mass DOT, who brought some signage down to help us close off roads while it was investigated, and those are lengthy investigations. So after I had talked with the town manager, this DOJ grant presented itself. There's actually a couple of them. One was from the grant money from the federal government to bolster school safety, and we had already had discussions about looking to add an additional school resource officer in the schools, and if that money was available to help ease the financial burden of the town of Auburn, I definitely thought it was the way to go, and the town manager did as well. And then there's another Staffing the Cops Fast grant. The grants are competitive. We generally run, just to give the board an idea, for almost 20 years, we've had the same staffing levels for the most part, meaning minimum staffing is a supervisor and 3 patrol officers. It's been the same. And I know you've heard me ad nauseum talk about my residents' requests. Number one request has been consistently traffic support and traffic enforcement on our primary and our secondary roads. And I agree with them. We're in a unique situation here in town, but we often don't have the resources to be able to do that. So I'm requesting the board's permission to allow us to apply for this grant. It will serve a few different purposes. It would serve to help fund the school resource officer that the board has previously agreed to, and that will allow me to put three more uniformed personnel on the road. Ultimately, similar to the fire department, I would like to get my staffing up so I have 4 patrolmen and 1 sergeant that's minimum staffing. And that's kind of where we're at. Everyone knows that works in companies, you know, your workforce ebbs and flows. I've got a patrolman that was just promoted to a second lieutenant in the military, and he's being shipped off for another 5 months. I have an officer that's been out for months on IOD. I have another officer that just got injured over the weekend, and it proves challenging, especially when you have to fill for vacations and all of those things, and we come into our summer months that are very busy. So that's it, really, in a nutshell, if Scott wants to go through the presentation. So the grant hiring program pays up to 75% of the entry-level fringe costs for the positions. It's $125,000 max per position for a 3-year period, assuming the step 1 salary for a patrolman is $58,600 and change, and fringe costs are $98,609 per person. The initial hiring costs, the screenings, and the equipment, and the academy tuition, we can absorb that in our budget that we already have. Program parameters require a minimum of 25% local cash cost share. The grant program would pay for $41,666 per officer for the 3-year grant period, and they must be retained for a minimum of 12 months after the initial 36-month grant period, and the funding source must be identified for a retention plan. New positions are added over and above what's already budgeted for the 41 positions that we currently have. With your approval, the deadline to apply is May 4th, and we would be getting on that right away to make sure we meet the timelines. what we do with the extra positions, the intent, like I previously spoke, would be enhanced school safety and traffic enforcement. One additional body would be dedicated to the schools, as the SRO necessity for having one for 5 schools is less than ideal. Our SRO currently handles any and all calls with school-aged children in town, as well as meeting with all the school principals and department heads, and he manages to try to do traffic at all 5 schools, and shares between the package hog and the Swiss because they have similar starting times. I'm not going to hop on this too much because I'm not a fearmongerer, but we all know that there's been, that school shootings have been on the increase. We saw with the shooting that happened today in Louisville, that critical response time for police are just that. They're critical to get there to get to the threat. And I just heard a statistic on national news today that said that these active shootings have doubled in the last 2 years. So I think adding additional public safety personnel on the police department side, and I think the positions that we're asking for is a meager ask at this point for the challenges that we have on the police department. I'm not going to do death by PowerPoint here because you have the material in your packets, but if you go to the page where you can see Sergeant Lamoureux standing outside of his cruiser, I hopped on before the most frequent complaint we get is traffic complaints and traffic enforcement and speeding and red light violations and those things. And I will publicly say that those things are very important to me. They always have been. Anybody that knows me and how I worked as a police officer throughout my career, I've been very proactive, and I've tried, and I do my very best as a manager to get my troops out there to do the same. So additional officers will allow us to hopefully increase the minimum manning to 4 officers and 1 supervisor. It won't get us there, but it will get us that much closer. Without getting into too much detail, when we go to calls, it's not like it used to be. 20 years ago, we could go to a call, take a report, and have it done probably inside of 15 or 20 minutes. We go to an OUI crash, they make an arrest, that officer's off the road for 4 to 5 hours. And that takes away from those resources. So if we're minimum manning, he makes an arrest, and it's a multiple officer call because we have to bring in officers off the road to assist with the booking while the officer does the police report. So it's policing and police reporting is definitely a challenge. So you can see before you the statistics from the previous years. Obviously, the calls went down during the pandemic because people weren't calling the police. They weren't calling the fire department for ambulances when they were really sick. So we saw that on both sides. But the calls for service are increasing. And I think that essentially wraps up my request. The last page, the conclusions, officer safety, there'll be more backup, another officer in the schools to increase our presence, increase traffic enforcement, which will hopefully decrease the number of motor vehicle crashes, and the grant paying up to 75% I think is ideal.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions from the board members?
Yeah, through the chair, how many more positions would make it to your ideal staffing?
So, when the fire department did a employee study, the police department wasn't part of it, so I don't want to speak out of school. I can tell you that from conversations with my Lieutenant Ken Charlton, who does our scheduling, in order to efficiently run all 3 shifts, 24/7, 365, it would be 6 additional people dedicated to operations. The 4 that I'm asking you for, one is the SRO that we already agreed to, and if I'm able to do it, I'm going to staff a 3 to 11 officer dedicated in admin position for traffic enforcement.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Mr. Chambers?
So you mentioned step 1 in your presentation. How long does it take an officer to get to step 2 or the next step? Is that years of service? Is it based on skill set?
I think we have, what, 8? We have 8 steps. The last collective bargaining agreement that they signed, the patrolmen's union added another step to their, through you, Mr. Chairman, Ed, is it yearly?
It's yearly. But that begs another question that I'd like to ask. So I know you identified step 1 currently at 58 and change. I believe if they go to step 2 in year 2, they get 75% of that, not at the step 1 level, so.
Correct.
They get 75% regardless of what step they're at.
That's my next question.
Up to 125,000.
So through 3 years, they would theoretically go up to the 3. Would they be at step 3, or is that 125,000?
They would be at step 3, and they would not be at 125,000.
No, it's, they restructured the way this grant is done. It used to be 100%, 75%, 50, and then in year 4, you were on your own. You know, the municipality was on its own, full coverage. I looked at some old numbers, but we applied for this grant in 2013, and the total cost of it back then was $479,322. So just in the, you know, in the initial, the part that the grant will pay is $500, and then what the town is also, you know, the fringe part and whatever other costs associated with getting them on-ramped and whatnot. It's a great program. As the chief mentioned, there's 225 awards going to be made nationwide. Some preferences given to people that, or to municipalities rather, that applied and did not succeed last year. So it's nothing ventured, nothing gained, I guess, you know.
If I may, I think the incremental increase between steps is about 4.5%.
So through the chair also, so we're looking, the grant covers the 3 years, and then we're paying 100% on the 4th year. Does that need to go to town meeting for that increase, or we're just asking for that additional budget in that 4th year?
No, I think town meeting's role is to meet the recommendation for appropriation, to meet the obligation for that year. Yes, I think by allowing the police department to move forward with this grant, you are committing future dollars towards those officers. But it gives us an opportunity to, over that 3-year period, to set money aside to meet that obligation.
Thank you.
Any further questions, Mr. Carpenter?
Just from a perspective of workforce management, what is the plan for doing a study of not just the police department, but the other departments at Town Hall and DPW?
So I think our staffing levels are typically measured by what other communities are doing as well. We do a salary survey in comparison of staff with our comparables, and we seem to be in line with what they have. We did have a study done by an outside consultant that reviewed our job descriptions and looked at the staffing levels of all the administrative aspects of town government. There were no deficiencies or inadequacies that they identified at the time. In terms of the police department, I believe that's well overdue, and certainly I think that's something that the town should consider in the next year or two.
I can just follow up. How long ago did we do that survey of the administrative functions?
2 years ago?
How often are they usually done?
I don't recall it ever being done. We did have a salary survey done, but not a review of and a change of all the job descriptions that I can recall, so.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily concerned about the job descriptions, because I'm sure they're probably working well beyond whatever's in their job description, because that's usually what happens. But just trying to get an idea of what the expectation can be, and I think town meeting should get an answer to that as well. You know, what is the police department, the fire department, because your call volumes seem to be growing by leaps and bounds on a yearly basis. So it's not like they're growing by, 1%, 3%. They're growing by 10% or more. So this is a serious issue that we need to plan for, obviously, which I know you're doing. But I think this is an initial step, but, I think town meeting is going to want to know, what's step 2, what's step 3, because this is just the Band-Aid. So what's next year? What's the ask next year? And how are we going to pay for that?
If I may, I think the metrics are somewhat different when you're looking at the operations of the police department versus town government. As we bring on more technology, a lot of the processing is done electronically and not so much by hand in the old days. So those kinds of things have to be examined and considered as well. What enhancements are we going to make from a technological point of view, and how is that going to impact our personnel? So a point well taken. I think that's something we can talk about and maybe propose to have done. So, thank you for those
Thank you.
comments.
No, thank you.
One other thing I'd like to add, I know the chief and the deputy chief, we had some intense discussions about staffing, and at the time I recommended one patrol with a start date of January. At the time, I didn't know the level of state aid at the time, and I was quite honestly looking at an overall operational deficit. That being said, I was committed to both these gentlemen here that I would revisit it in the fall. And quite honestly, I would prioritize that second position because it was not only a concern of town administration, it was a concern of the finance committee and a concern for overall safety for the police department. They indicated that the priority right now would be an SRO, but certainly traffic safety was a high priority as well. So even if the board doesn't allow this to move forward, I'm going to prioritize that, and I'm going to prioritize that second position at the fall town meeting. At least program it into the budget, even if it's a January start date, then it will be baked in permanently. In terms of the funding, the one position that's programmed now, we are suggesting be part of this request. The money that's in the budget now would pay for half of the commitment for the 4 if it should get approved. So the overall impact, if the 4 should get approved on the FY24 operational budget, and all depending on the start date, even if we were to get them all by January 1st or July, it's only going to be an additional $30,000 on the FY24 budget. So it's a small additional amount of money, but it gets them a lot of resources and gets them closer to where they need to be.
I have one more question. Are we anticipating these are going to be lateral transfers, or is this new hires? So what is the delay baked in?
Through the chair, we used to have them knocking down our door to come over as laterals. I was one of them doing the knocking back in the day, and this guy too. And we had him coming over, but, through collective bargaining agreements becoming more competitive from town to town, we're seeing much less than that. The last group of recruits, I have 2 that just went out on their own that finished field training. They just went out on their own April 1st. I have another young lady that's in the academy out in Randolph right now, and I have another individual that just graduated the academy. Those 4 individuals that we picked were out of 150 names out of civil service, which lends a whole nother topic of discussion, which is why towns across the Commonwealth are dropping civil service like a hot potato. But that being said, most likely there will be new hires, new recruits through the academy trained, and that's what I anticipate.
How long will it take them between hire and them actually being competent to be on the street? So you get this, you get the person in January. Realistically, when does the impact actually help the department achieve some of these goals? Because I want to see as many traffic, protections as possible.
It's a year.
Okay. That's it, I'm done. Thank you.
All right. Any questions for administration? No. All right. So do we have a motion?
I'm going to make a motion that we authorize the application, acceptance, and expenditure of the federal grants for the 2023 COPS hiring program for an additional 4 patrol officers.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? All right, it is a vote.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate the support.
All right, going back to agenda item 5C, again, that is the annual town meeting warrant, and that is for the board to vote on recommendations for the annual town meeting articles.
Mr. Chairman, if I could ask, is anybody here for item 6A? And I think we have plenty of people here for 6C, so I would just ask that we move those up, if, in whatever order.
6C is not, the applicant is not here yet.
Okay. Is any staff here for 6A?
And we have, this gift acceptance for Ocean Edison.
Okay.
And Adam is here for 6A.
For 6A? All right, Mr. Carpenter, I would entertain motions to move up agenda item 6A and also 5D.
So moved.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. All right, first, sorry, Mr. Bernard, we're going to jump to the gift acceptance real quick. So we have gift acceptance. We have fire rescue, a cargo trailer from the town of Charlton for CERT. Let's see, we have Mr. Chanette. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Joe Chanette, 129 South Street, Auburn, and with me tonight is Kathy Stone. She's the director for your local CERT emergency team, and I'm your vice director for emergency management.
Excellent, welcome.
Currently, the Town of Auburn CERT team stores their shelter supplies in a trailer that is stored behind Town Hall that is shared with emergency management and Board of Health. Okay? Because of our overflow, we also store CERT equipment at the West Street School. And the town of Charlton has a trailer that is surplus to their needs, okay, and they've offered us to us, and it's going to take some rehab that we can do with volunteer services and things like that. And through the help of Chief Coleman, okay, we'd like to accept that as a gift from the town of Charlton, which they obtained through grant services.
Excellent, excellent.
They have gone on to a bigger trailer.
So bigger and better?
So if I look off into the future, we'll be here again.
All right. Any questions? No? Do we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would make a motion that we accept the gift with gratitude and that a letter be prepared for your signature to the
Town
gift
of
store.
And do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, and we did, just while we're on 5D, we did have a second gift added, a gift from Pauline Starkus, and that is for $100 for equipment, for programs. And does it say it's for the library? For the library programs. So do we have a motion?
Motion to accept with gratitude?
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. All right, now moving on to agenda item, town manager items 6A. That's the Central Mass Regional Planning Commission District Location Technical Assistance Grant. A vote to authorize, accept, and the grant for Phase 1 of the development of a regional heat resiliency plan in the amount of $14,729. Good evening.
Good evening, Dr. Adam Bernard, I'm the town planner. So we're asked to sign on to this particular application. This is a regional plan for district local technical assistance. There's 4 communities involved: Auburn, Worcester, Millbrae, and Charlton. This is to begin the process of applying for an EA grant to expand on heat island, basically heat island effect and heat resiliency, trying to prepare for the presumed increase of heat due to climate change. It's going to, this planning process is really the 4 key towns, but it's going to be the entire CMRPC region is going to be asked to participate, which is City of Worcester and 39 area towns. So it's for $14,729. The Physical Development Committee for CMRPC already voted to accept this application, so we've already been granted approval by that committee to get this process started, so.
Okay. And this is to really put more shade on the streets,
Yes,
simply put?
that's part of it, yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
Go ahead, Steve, you move first.
Yep, so if other towns decide not to opt in, does that increase our costs?
We don't have any costs except for my participation. There's no match. The state funds DLTA money, and the state allocates that money directly to CMRPC. So the town's not receiving directly any funds, it's indirectly funded.
Thank you.
Mr. Carpenter?
How much time do you think this will take out of your day?
I believe we have to have it done by end of this calendar year, so 8 months.
If I can, Mr. Chairman, how does this at all factor into an open space plan? Is this eventually going to be rolled into the open space plan, or is it going to have any impact, or is it proposed to have any impact on our zoning or anything like that?
I haven't really thought about rolling it into the open space plan per se, though I think some of this project and others kind of answer some of the objectives in the open space plan. That plan was just updated 2 years ago, year and a half ago. So it's fairly up to date, and they'll have to be updated again in a few short years. So I think these processes will help all kind of feed off each other.
And any anticipation that this might affect, say, the planning board's landscape bylaw or anything like that to meet any of these needs?
I don't know how directly it will look at those plantings. I do know that like the subdivision regulations should be updated because there are certain trees that are listed on that we don't want planted anymore, which is something that on my list of things to do is to address those changes. So I think it'll all feed in, and hopefully I can ask that question specifically and get some guidance on what the region, the state wants to see regarding plantings.
Okay, thank you.
And do we have a motion?
Make a motion that we vote to authorize and accept the grant for Phase 1 of the development of a regional heat resiliency plan.
A second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. It is a vote. Thank you, Dr. Martin. Okay. Help me out. Where are we now? Back to
Warrants,
5C?
right?
Yeah. All right, moving back to agenda item 5C. You guys have the warrant in your packets?
Mr. Chairman, can I make a few comments?
Please.
Before the board takes any action? I provided an update to the board in terms of the Finance Committee's recommendation and what impact that has on tax dollars for FY '24 based upon their recommendation. And I'm going to refer you to this packet that has been provided to you. If we tax the full levy at 2.5, we would have an additional $1,058,000 available for appropriation. But based upon our recommendation and the Finance Committee's vote, we're taxing at approximately just under 1/2, 0.49 out of 2.5, which is about 19.63% out of 2.5. The amount that we're taxing is $258,000 out of a 2.5 allowable amount of $1.317 million. So that's good news. And certainly, there were a number of things that we did not recommend, and we're going to revisit in the fall. But I heard the board loud and clear when you gave us some direction that you want to try to minimize as best we can the level of taxation to our residents. So that does provide for Article 3, Article 4, and any outside articles that have been requested. There was one article that the Finance Committee did not take, or several that didn't take any action on, but that's not going to have any impact on the total tax levy, those articles. So with that, I just wanted to give the board a brief update. And once again, a summary of the finance recommendations have been provided to you as well. I know that was of some concern last year, and we provided that for you in advance.
Okay. Oh, you said 1 through 5 through 11.
Ask if there's any questions. I mean,
Do we have any specific questions on any of the articles?
I do, Mr. Chairman. But I can go last if anybody else has any. Hearing none.
I know that's shocking, sorry.
Floor is yours.
Article 16, which is about the opioid settlement, and it talks about a special purpose stabilization fund, and I don't recall ever seeing that wording in the warrants that I've looked at, so just kind of FYI to me, why that structure of an account, and who will have control of the account, and what will the expenses be eligible to?
Very good question.
draw?
So, I think the prior town manager informed the board, and I was present at the meetings, that we were part of a class action suit that sued some of the providers for opioid prescriptions. And as a result of that, we have received approximately about $120,000 to date. Now, DOR requires that we record that as general fund revenue. Problem being is we can't use that for any educational purposes, any health-related purposes, because we're not allowed to set it aside. This allows us to set those proceeds aside in a special stabilization account that can only be voted out by a vote of town meeting. So all revenues received from such settlements would go into the reserve account, and it can only come out by a vote of town meeting on a 2/3 vote, just like any other stabilization account. We would make a recommendation for those purposes after consulting with the schools, Board of Health, Public Safety, whatever need is out there that would best suit our community, that's what we're gonna make a recommendation for.
Is this a 2/3 majority of town meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Voted out of the stabilization? Just checking, it's been a few years. Article 18, can you just give a brief overview of that, which is about the bond premium reserve account?
So the last time we went to market, we had a bond sale of a little over $5 million. We forced a premium on that. That premium resulted in revenue to the town of $400-some-odd-thousand. The law has changed since then. That $400,000 now can only be used to pay down the debt and interest on that bond for a period of time. Prior to that, we were able to reserve it, which we did, and use it for other capital needs consistent with that are eligible under any bond sale. So there was a need that arose as a result of filling several positions that were vacant in the police department that warranted an additional vehicle per shift. During COVID, we couldn't even get vehicles. There was a backlog, there was a wait. This offered us an opportunity to get the vehicles now that they're available, and get them up to a full complement. Now that we've filled all those positions, we have currently no vacancies, so there was a need for those vehicles.
So how much of the 400,000 is left, or has that been spent on other
So
items?
there's 400, I think there's like 460,000. 225 is coming out, and we had 50 earmarked in the CIP under Article 4 for the health department, for the electric vehicles that we got a grant for. That was our share.
Okay. Now, these are not replacement vehicles, these are new vehicles? This is adding to the fleet, not replacing?
I think a vehicle or two has been retired as a result of these coming on. I think there was just a vote by the I'm getting two vehicles have been declared surplus by a vote of the board.
Okay. Thank you. And I just had a question on the Article 24 and 25 and 26, just a general understanding of what caused those needs, and
So I don't, our DPW director is here. I think she could best fill in the blanks for you, Mr. Mr. Carpenter, did you say 24 and 25?
26.
24, 25, 24 and 25, no, 26 is, well, yes, 26 too.
Sure. Good
Yeah,
evening, through the
Joanna.
chair. So Article 24, we're asking for $150,000 from the sewer retained earnings for a design of remediation of one of our largest pipes that carries sewage from Goddard Drive down to Route 20 towards our last pump station. That was the result of our evaluation that was done a few months back, that was finalized, and that we had an evaluation done of what was expected to be our worst 10% of our sewer infrastructure, and that was one of the priority areas that was identified.
Thank you.
Then,
25 is Gotta Drive to Route 20.
I apologize. So 24 is, so that was 25. I mixed up the order of the articles. 24 is our, a sewer force main that we've had, I believe, 3 failures over the last, I want to say 8 years. And all those failures were within a very short section of that force main. So that would be the design of and it would be the design of remediation of that pipe. Also, we would be looking at testing to see, what the integrity of that pipe is in that section, as well as the remaining force main. And both of those articles would be coming out of sewer retained earnings.
And to actually put the design into action would be a separate article at
Correct.
a later time? Okay. Do you have an idea of how long that would take between design and bringing forward a new article?
I would assume that the design it would probably be another year at least before we came to the town for additional. We would also be looking to evaluate where that funding would come from, whether it be the state revolving account or any other funding sources.
Okay. And then just 26, something about electrical upgrades, so.
So 26 is $100,000 for safety and electrical upgrades at the DPW garage. Ever since the municipalities have, I think it was in 2018, municipalities are now subject to OSHA standards. So ever since that time, we've been working with the town's insurance company to provide additional training for our employees, safety training. And this is part of that ongoing effort. We had an evaluation done by our insurance company to look at safety, deficiencies within the garage. So this money would go towards addressing those deficiencies.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one more question. It's not on a warrant article. It's on the roof at the DPW. What is the status of that?
So we had a town meeting article a couple of years back or about a year ago, we had some money appropriated for the evaluation of the roof, and some repairs, some immediate repairs. So those immediate repairs have been done, and come to find out that the roof is basically, there was a roof that was placed on top of another roof. So we're going to be moving forward with a complete design. So we're going to be looking to have a design done for a total roof replacement.
Okay, thank you. I'm all set with my questions, sir.
Okay. All right, so, to the board, do you have any preference as to how we go through this? We can go through it in its entirety, we can go through it piecemeal. Does anybody have certain warrant items that they do not want to recommend? Kind of taking your guys' lead here.
I would like to, personally, the zoning articles, which are at the end, which I always say they should be at the beginning, because by the time you get to them, everybody's exhausted. So in fairness to the planning staff, it would be nice if once in their careers, they actually get to be first on the agenda.
All right, so 27 and 28 we'll take separately?
That would be great.
Okay. All right, and do we have any motions?
On Articles 1 and 2, those are, well, one directly impacts us, and the other one is more of a housekeeping matter. I would just make a motion that we defer to the petitioner.
Second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
Aye.
It is a
I'd
vote.
rather just-
All right. And otherwise, sounds like you guys want to go piecemeal, so Article 3, do we have a motion?
Well, I'd make a motion on, sorry. Was it 1 through 12?
Oh, we did 1 and 2
3 through-
already.
I'm sorry.
3 through 12?
Yep, 3 through 12. That we, sorry, I forget which one it is. Recommend.
Recommend.
Yep.
We have a motion to recommend Articles 3 through 12.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 It is a vote. All right, that leaves 13 through 27.
Mr. Chairman, Article 13 is something that we've done every year since they established the fund. So McKinney-Vento is monies that we get from the state, and we have to appropriate out of general fund revenues. Is that correct, Mr. Kazanovich? Article 14, McKinney-Vento.
Right, McKinney-Vento comes in as part of the state aid. So that number's not known yet, so my guess would be, my guess would be probably there'll be a motion to postpone this until the fall town meeting, unless a number is known at the time of town
We
meeting.
haven't gotten it yet.
Oh,
Through
we
the
do have a
chair,
number.
through the chair, we did receive the number from Desi today for the homeless transportation.
I apologize, I just saw that. So the amount that is being requested is $4,142.05.
From the McKinney-Vento
Yep.
receipts.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
I'd make a motion, Mr. Chairman, that we recommend both.
13 and 14?
Correct.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? It is a vote. All right, moving on to Article 15.
This is something that we get an appropriation, correct, Mr. Kazanovich?
Yes, Cecilia, was that you on the call?
Yes, it is.
So foster
Yes, I'm
care
here.
transportation, I know you called the office today and requested that one of them is going to be removed, but we don't have the opportunity.
Okay, that would be the foster care one. There were no receipts taken in the previous year in FY '22, so we will not be getting reimbursement for foster care this time. So we were going to remove that, or I'll speak to that town meeting, I guess, or Dr. Chamberlain will. That will just not, we'll postpone it indefinitely.
This is the one they want to remove?
This is the one they want to
This,
So 14 is
some-
being removed.
14, although
The
because
one
it-
for
sorry, 15.
DEF
15,
transportation.
because it appears on the warrant and it was already, Finance Committee already took a position on it, we can't remove it. But the school department is going to, through a motion, is going to make a motion to postpone this indefinitely, so I would just defer this one to the petitioner.
Make a motion, we defer to the petitioner based on the information we received from the school committee.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Motion and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And Article 16, Mr. Carpenter had already asked questions on that one.
Make a motion that Articles 16 through 22 recommend.
I'll second.
Okay, motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Okay. And moving on to Article 24, that was what was just explained to us.
I'd make a motion that we recommend 24, 25, 26.
Okay, we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Was 23 included in that one?
No,
Okay.
that's, I think we skipped 23.
Yeah.
My
I thought that
apologies.
was in your other
Okay.
motion.
That was not, sorry, I was,
This gets tricky.
I know, I was like, wait, am I missing?
You keeping up with us, Sharon?
I'm trying.
go back to
All right,
Article
back to 23, please.
I'll make a motion to recommend.
This is just leftover money, Mr. Kazanovich, in the account of the town meeting.
Right,
town
this money
clerk.
came in after the close of the fiscal year, but it's intended to offset expenses that were used in support of election-type activity?
Okay, so it has no effect on the tax.
No.
I would make a motion to recommend.
second.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. All right, that brings us to the zoning articles, Article 27.
I would make a motion, we defer to the petitioner.
Second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. And Article 28,
I'd make a motion, we defer to the petitioner.
we have a second?
I'm not seeing 28. Where did it go?
Right here.
I will second that.
Okay, motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye, it is a vote. Thank you.
Let me see, let me just go. Can we do 60?
Yeah, yeah. All right, so we have, we've already done 5D, and there's no proclamations and recognitions. Okay. I believe Jim's here.
Mr. Chairman, I see the planner here. Is he here for the housing production plan survey?
He is, yes.
Would you entertain a motion, and I apologize, I would have done it as part of 6A.
Absolutely.
To move this forward so that he doesn't have to.
Okay. Do we have a motion to move agenda item 6D up?
A second.
Motion and a second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye,
Votes.
sorry.
Hi, good evening. The town is in the process of updating its housing production plan. CMRPC is the consultant for that plan. As part of the planning process, we're looking for public input, such that the survey is being distributed. It went live this past Friday. It's going to be up for about 6 or 7 weeks. Encourage everybody to take it. There's a link on the town's webpage. There's also a link on the Facebook page. There will be hard copies available sometime this week at Town Hall and the Public Library. So we just want to encourage everybody to take the survey. There will also be a public forum, maybe later this summer or early fall, to get an opportunity for input. So I'd encourage everybody to distribute the survey best you can. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to agenda item 6C, we have the final development agreement for Perry Place and potential votes. You should have the development agreements in your packets, along with the exhibits provided by the applicants. Good evening. All right, so this has gone back and forth between the applicants and town manager and myself and counsel for both sides, really addressing the concerns that we spoke of, seems like several months ago now, in terms of what the developer would agree to do to offset the impacts of this project. Did you guys get a chance to review it?
Yeah.
Okay. Any questions?
I provided some questions to the town manager.
You did?
So, one of them, section 1A, the waivers that will be requested. Do we know what waivers are going to be requested?
So, under the 40B, they actually will list the waivers that 40B is allowing. So obviously you would, like when we're doing our LIP the application to the state, it would say, you know, what the current zoning is, and obviously going through a 40B, those are the waivers that they would be giving. We're not seeking any waivers from the town, but obviously under a 40B, we don't have to conform to the typical, you know, the bylaws, you know, obviously, single family or setbacks or anything like that. So that would be the waivers. But there's no waivers that we would be looking for from the town that the state doesn't give us.
So I believe we have cul-de-sacs at 700. This would exceed that, so you'd be looking to waive that.
So I think the one that you were talking about was more of, so in here, I forget which section it was, but it basically states that we'd be seeking waivers from the state as far as like the town bylaws, but we would not, and it specifically says that we're not exempt from paying like the town fees and whatnot. We would obviously, going through a 40B process, we don't have to conform to the typical bylaws, but we do have to pay all the fees and everything to you guys. Building permit fees, utility fees, all that stuff.
Section 1D, number 10, it does tie to the occupancy, the gift, and I didn't know if, through the town manager, I did request if we could tie that to occupancy and some months after. Again, I don't know what occupancy looks like. I don't know what your prices will be on the non-affordable units, so I mean, the market can dictate a lot of things, and
So when you're talking about the occupancy, is that for the donation?
Correct.
Correct, yeah, okay. So, you know, we tied that into the occupancy permit for the final occupancy. Obviously, it's per building, right? So as we're building them, we would get the occupancy for that building, for each building.
Yep.
You know, coming in, we would obviously do the 3-story building, the smaller building, much faster to build, easier to go, but we would immediately be going to the other ones. We really wouldn't hold up an occupancy permit. I mean, I'm fine if you wanted to change it, but we wouldn't hold up an occupancy permit
No,
for.
so I think the
understanding-
agreement was it was based on 100% occupancy.
See, I think that's where the confusion,
Oh, I got you.
questions. It's the issuance of the permit, not them filling the units.
That's not
Makes
what I
sense.
read, that's why
Oh,
How's
you know
that?
what? I didn't think of it that way. I just automatically read it the other way. Let me take a look at that again. I get what you're saying now, though.
Section D, number 10.
Yeah, you're right. I see how that could be confusing.
After issuance of occupancy permit?
Yeah, I was saying issuance of an occupancy permit. You're right, full occupancy. You're right. You're absolutely right.
That was the understanding of the parties. I think that got lost in translation.
It was, absolutely. Yeah, because we all just were on the same page that it was with the issuance of the last occupancy permit.
So again, my understanding is that safety is going to be something. So this is a long drive, and you're going to be seeking the waivers from that, but there's no second egress. I don't know if that's an actual safety concern that the state would recognize, but it's one that I recognize, and something from my time on the planning board. We have had other developers do through the site plan, and I understand you're not going through site plan approval, but I think this process, if it's not vetted out, we're pretty much stuck with a 1,200-foot cul-de-sac in there with some concessions that you guys made to widen it, but looking at those plans, again, I'm not driving the emergency vehicles around there. It does look tight, so it's concerning to me.
Did you have those concerns addressed with the fire department
We did.
previously? You did?
Yes, we did. We've changed the plans multiple times in order to satisfy them, and that was actually why we widened the road, proposing to widen the road coming in also.
I did reach out to town council. I haven't heard back about section 3. I just want to understand, like, duly influenced proceedings or unduly influenced proceedings. So I just want to make sure us as a board can vote one way, but as individuals, we still have the right to attend hearings and speak as citizens.
Just clarification, Selectman Chambers reached out to me, and I said, I may have to have that conversation with town council. That's really a gray area as to how a standing board member can participate in another proceeding, so I didn't want there to be a conflict. But I haven't gone that route yet because I didn't know the circumstances involving the situation.
Okay.
I know the board has a rule about it, just as a caution to any of us. We do have a rule. The chair has certain access, certain privileges, but we as individual members, I believe the rule says we have to get a vote of the board to.
Which I believe you've done in front of the planning board in the past when you were a selectman, Mr. Carpenter.
We have.
I do have concerns again. I know Mr. Crane brought up earlier regards to traffic and drainage, and I know the residents have had lots of concerns around the drainage. I'm not sure this agreement fully protects us. It seems pretty ambiguous, so those are.
Again, this is why, I mean, I don't want to speak for the developer, but that stormwater calculations, we're just not ripe to really go through all those calculations at this point in time. Concerns are fully warranted, but I believe that's a step you have to take as the process goes forward.
Yeah, so typically how it goes is obviously we would enter into this agreement, then we send it to the state. The one that we're working on right now, we're about 2 months in, roughly, of, sending all of our application and everything in. Then the state will come out, they would do a site walk, they do a site visit, which is basically just a quick visit. Then they give us our eligibility letter. At that point, then we start going to the zoning board. And that's where the town zoning board would typically have an outside engineer, third-party engineer, review all of our stuff, to go through all of our drainage. That's where like the real meat of the project really comes in. In our experience, and this is kind of just saying that, we're in agreements that we want to get into, have this being like a friendly 40B, where we work together and whatnot, instead of obviously going directly to the state. You're not approving it by this. This obviously would have to get vetted out through multiple engineers and everything. This isn't the end. You're not issuing the permit here.
So this is, through the chair, more for the town, and if you guys have information. So when this gets developed and we realize that people are walking on that very narrow road, we're going to have to install sidewalks, and the town's going to be on the hook for that. Is there a trigger with the amount of accidents, the amount of calls that we get? Like what's going to force in the future the town to need to put a sidewalk in that neighborhood?
Well, I would expect those concerns to be addressed when it's before the ZBA. And certainly, they would probably, I would assume, make a recommendation for the safety of the community or the residents, whether it be a sidewalk or, I can't speak for them. But I'm sure that's going to be raised at that level.
And that's one of my concerns. I'd like to be able to speak when those proceedings happen, but again, I don't want to influence decision. I just want to make sure that what we may or may not believe or is agreed to here is, and I don't know if we elect the chairman to speak at those, if that's something that happens, just to make sure that anything that we, again, hopefully it's written in here, but I don't see all that stuff written in here. I don't know the process. I am nervous about signing this for some of those concerns, but I will let others speak.
Just be cautious, because we do appoint the ZBA, and even though you're not intending to influence, and when I was on the planning board, we had members of the Board of Selectmen come when we were doing the mall, and they had a very different point of view, which is absolutely any individual's right. But I don't know if this, obligates us to say nice things. I guess that would be a caution for me is, I don't think we're getting enough. I just, the sidewalk should be in here. There should be funds encumbered for a sidewalk for that road. That road, it's a safety issue, and the residents shouldn't have to pay for that. As to some of these, stormwater matters, perhaps we could strengthen the language, it's saying you have to prove that you can do these things, who are you proving it to? The ZBA, the state, who is it that ultimately is making a decision as to whether a road in the town of Auburn is not going to be harmed?
So typically that would go through I don't know who the town uses for their engineer. Sometimes you have Graves Engineering, or we have a couple other, engineering firms that would review all that. Because obviously, we wouldn't expect the town to just have our engineer do it and say, yeah, it looks great. Obviously, we fully expect you guys to have a reviewing engineer, a peer review, that would go through and obviously be paid for by us, but in your best interest, then they would review it.
But I guess my concern is, where in these items does it say that you'll even do that? It just says that you have to do something, but what if you choose not to do it?
Well, obviously the state and, the ZBA, once it gets there, if it doesn't work and, there's something that's a legitimate concern that would make it not work, then I would assume they would raise that and would go back to the state, but they would be the ones that would be doing that. I don't think they would just give us the permit without, if it didn't work.
I guess in a general sense, Mr. Chairman, the ZBA has to oversee this project. That's their role.
Yes.
In state law. Does this even really belong in this document? Because we can't force them to request it, and where the proponent has made certain suggestions that this will do something to benefit the residents on that street. I don't know if that's true or not, but it just seems to me that if we can't direct the ZBA to do it, which we shouldn't anyways, it's really a decision for them, and what if they choose not to ask them to do this? What impact does that have on this process that we're endeavoring to complete?
To do hydrology reports?
Well, this is specific to raising the road, widening the road. What if the ZBA looks at it and says, I don't think that's appropriate to widen the road. There's this or that reason. So again, this is, what are we getting here? We're not getting anything. The developer has made some suggestions that this is going to improve the lot of the folks on Perry Place and Perry Street. Yet we haven't, we're kind of outside the process trying to affect the process, which is kind of interesting, but legal in this particular phrase. So to me, I just don't see that these should necessarily be in this, or if they're in this, that we should have extra language in it to discuss what happens if this doesn't happen. If the ZBA says, I don't want you to do the 100-foot flood zone. Does the town get something for those costs that they are savings? I mean, that's, seems like a reasonable ask if they don't perform certain things because the board with jurisdiction chooses not to ask for those certain things. Some of these costs would be saved by the developer, obviously. And how is that going to flow through the town to assist it in, because when we started the process, it was, this process is meant to reduce the cost to the taxpayers, and there's really nothing in here that I see that is reducing the cost to the taxpayers. They're going to have to go to the Auburn Water District to get water through the city of Worcester. We don't have any impact on the water commissioners. That's a private thing. That's not a taxpayer thing. That's a ratepayer thing. So I don't see why that's in the contract, unless the water district has asked us to put it in there. And again, the additions to the road, I mean, to me, I'd be looking at, to Mr. Chambers' point, what can we do to this road, should it be widened, to make it more safe for the residents on the street, in that we understand many of our roads in town don't have sidewalks. And we're looking at a 1,200-foot, roadway with, we don't know how many cars are going to be on this road. And certainly I'm not fear-mongering, but, it's nice to have a sidewalk. I would think that would be more a savings to the residents than a questionable, ask for raising the road out of the 100-foot buffer zone. Again, because the ZBA is going to be doing this, and I don't necessarily feel that that's a benefit to the taxpayers one way or the other, because it's a private road. The taxpayers aren't on the hook to raise this 100 feet out of the floodplain. It's a private road. We're limited in what we can even spend on it to make it passable if we need to. So to me, that's not anything to the town, and maybe it is to the abutters. I don't know. It doesn't sound like they're particularly fond of the idea, one way or the other, but that's, something that, I just don't see where we're saving the taxpayers anything. We potentially could be saving the ratepayers of the Auburn Water District, and that is a big thing for the ratepayers there, but that's not our jurisdiction for this connection, which we don't even know how long that'll take to come into fruition, because it has to go under a railroad, which anybody who's dealt with railroads would know. You could be stuck there for 3 years before the railroad makes a decision one way or the other. So to me, some of these things, again, as it was presented to us at the beginning of the process, it was, we're trying to save the taxpayers money and trying to mitigate the costs to the taxpayers. But I don't see anything here that is really doing that. So that's my conundrum, in addition to, if we go to the ZBA and we sign this and we said, well, we think this is a good project, because that's all over the document. We think this is a good project. We think it's, something that we want. And I think every one of us is in favor of affordable housing. Unfortunately, where people choose to put it isn't always in a suitable location. So, that's my other concern with any sort of action against individual board members or the board as a whole, if we don't like how this, train continues down the track. And we say something at a public meeting, and suddenly, the town's getting sued because, hey, we signed this and we said, yeah, this is something good. We think that this is good, but those are my concerns. But I know a lot of work went into it, and I certainly appreciate the time that you and Mr. Kazanovich put into it, and I know it's certainly not an easy process to go through. But those are my concerns.
Ms. Ruthly, any concerns, any questions?
I share many of the same concerns. I know a lot of residents have reached out to me as well. about the widening of the roadway and the water runoff. So I think I have a lot more questions.
Okay. To the developer, just for clarity of record, I'm getting the sense that my fellow colleagues here don't want to vote this forward. Is it your intention to go forward with the 40B project regardless of tonight's result?
Yes.
Without any of these items?
Correct.
All right, anything further? Do you guys want to see potential changes as far as sidewalks or some of the concerns that you raised, or do you want to take a vote on it now?
I'm okay voting now.
Is there potential for sidewalks?
So, when we spoke with the DPW, we told them, obviously, we have a certain width that, you know, the right-of-way is within. Whether we do sidewalks or we widen the road completely, it really makes no difference to us. Really, whatever the DPW, whatever the boards would want. So I guess to answer your question, yes, open to it. But it would just be whatever DPW and everybody else, I think I'd get their input as long as, and with fire, because we did work with fire quite a bit. And I think that they felt as though there was a bigger benefit to widen the road more than there was to have the sidewalks, but,
Okay.
But to simply answer your question, yes, we would be open to sidewalks.
Okay.
Do you have anything else further to add?
What was that?
Do you have anything else further to add?
No,
Through the chair, would the developer like to continue the conversation, or would he like us to take a vote?
whatever the board feels
Yeah,
is
it's really our
necessary.
decision.
We're open to, really open to either. If you have, more questions and more stuff that, want us to take a look at, more than happy to, obviously. It's been through the process, for a long time, so if you need some more time, it's not a make or break. Obviously, to get to your point too, obviously, we own the land. This is what we're intending to do. It's not like this is under contract and, if we don't get this, we're gonna walk away. Obviously, at this point, we do own the property, so we are gonna be moving forward
Yep, with the project.
with the project.
Yes, but not with our signature, and that does mean something to me anyway. If I put my signature on something and say, this is good, this is something, not that I haven't made some bad decisions, I'm gonna be the first one to admit it that I have.
And I understand, obviously, where you're coming from, right? It's project in a neighborhood, and typically, we do homes, single-family homes, we do all kinds of stuff, and nobody ever really comes and says, oh, I'm so happy they're building here. We never typically get that, so we're very used to, obviously, a lot of opposition with whatever we're doing. But I do think as far as going with the LIP application, obviously, it would be up to the board, but, the difference to us is, obviously, it's a little bit of a faster process, a little bit of an easier process to go with the state, and that's why, obviously, we're willing to give up what we're willing to give up. But obviously, if we go directly to the state, there's a lot of things that we would not need to do, but we would be spending money in other ways that, aren't as beneficial to what we feel like, obviously, and hopefully the board would feel like that the neighborhood would be getting. But obviously, going directly to the state, there's other expenses that we have, but, to put it back into the community rather than legal or time or whatever, always seems to be more beneficial.
And do you have a time limit in which you're seeking to get this piece, either to move on from it or to go with it?
I mean, as soon as possible, obviously. We have no set time limit that I have to get it in by a certain point, but, obviously, if it's gonna be going in a certain direction, then I think we would just move in either direction, whether it would get signed or not.
Through the chair, can I ask, because I just don't know the answer to it, would the state require you to widen the roads, or recommendations from the fire department?
So they would obviously, everything would, would come down to safety. So if they did feel like, it did need to be widened or if something needed to be done, yes, they would make us do it. It's not a complete free-for-all for us that we can just come in and really do whatever we want. They do obviously, the state is doing this because they're pushing the towns for obviously more density and more affordable housing and everything. So that's why the, 40B process is there. But, no, they don't just, it's not a complete free-for-all, but they would still have, jurisdiction over that.
Site, yeah.
I say we give it 2 weeks.
Well, I want clarity going forward. I mean, it's not a frustration, but I really don't have the word for it right now. That we took the concerns of the board and we feel that we got it into this agreement. Absent, we certainly couldn't get everything. I know that Mr. Chambers had wanted more affordable units or reduction of the height of some of the buildings, which we had some candid discussion about. But for the developer, for their own reasons, needed to make this a viable project. So if I do not want to continue, I'd rather have this voted down tonight, to be honest with you, versus going forward without clarity. I mean, if you have clarity that we can have a direction that or specific items you want to see added to this, or specific things detracted from it, then I'm certainly willing to continue this conversation. However, without clarity, I just don't know what we're doing at this point.
I would make a motion that we vote not to sign the LIP as presented.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, any further discussion on that?
Well, I think clarity is, part of this is, and perhaps I'm just getting old and I probably should give it up, but when board members need extra time to think about things, that is the clarity. Board members, we didn't know what this final agreement was. We saw what the prior agreement was, and there were a lot of questions that potentially have been ironed out here, or at least, in some fashion massaged. But I don't think I've been secretive about my intention that there's got to be a net gain, and there's nothing in here that's a net gain for us. That I can go to the taxpayers and say, my gosh, we got you $20,000 for an event, which is not insubstantial, and I'm certainly not in any way, putting it down, but I think the residents need more, because this is an established neighborhood. We are doing infill building. It is an apartment style. They're all single-family homes. Obviously, we know market forces rule the day, but, I think it's reasonable for the residents to expect more for their neighborhood, and I'm just not seeing it. So, again, if it's the will of the board that we voted down, that's fine. But I think if we give it 2 weeks and we have further conversations, who knows, Time
just
can
for-
heal all wounds.
Reconsideration of, as it exists, or do you have any recommendations for edits?
Well, to me, the big thing is going to be the sidewalk. I'm going to be honest with you. The sidewalk is, and the screening should definitely, again, I think the ZBA is going to do their best for that, but, I do know some of the residents are very concerned about privacy, and the new residents on that street are going to be concerned about their privacy as well. It's kind of a double-edged gift to each other that you don't have to kind of, look at each other, I guess. I don't know. But, that would be something that I would like to see.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut you off at all. We do have, I'm sorry, I can't see which one it is.
I know there is a screening
Screening
plan
to abutters,
attached
yeah,
to-
number 13.
Okay. I
Eight,
did read
excuse
it.
me. Provide a landscape plan that will provide screening to abutters. The developer had expressed an interest that they did not really like your white vinyl fences. They didn't really feel that it gave that privacy that you speak of, and they felt that, natural screen, is that correct? Am I saying natural?
Yeah, so we typically really like to prefer to do a natural screen rather than just like a white vinyl fence. So if you go 6 feet or 8 feet with a vinyl fence, that's it, right? It doesn't obviously keep going, and it seems more of a harsh line when we're doing them, we're open to it, but typically what we like to do is just like a really thick, trees and whatnot that'll continue to grow, up and provide more privacy, in the future. So we typically like to see that. Again, if there was certain spots you wanted a fence, we'd be obviously open to it. It's not a cost thing, but it's because the trees that we're bringing in typically cost us more than what a fence is, because they're, we're not buying them at Home Depot. We're getting good-sized trees. So we do typically like that over a fence, but if, a fence is something that you'd want in certain areas, I'm open to it, but would just prefer trees.
Well, and I would say that we need some language in there about replacement, because as we know, you may plant the most lovely
Yeah.
things and they may not go. So, I know conservation, they get so many whacks at the replantings. So I don't know if we can put something in there, or there's an outright gift that is in a trust. I don't even know if that's legal to take a trust like that.
Probably put it into like obviously the docs or whatever of the project. I mean, we're going to own the project and maintain the project.
Thinking
so.
when you're done and you're going to be managing the project.
That's correct.
Or at least that's your plan now.
That's correct,
But again, in the future, who knows what's going to happen? And so the concern with a fence, much like with natural screening, is what if you get a new owner and, I don't like that, I'm just going to clear cut it, and it's on my property, and I can do that. So I don't know if there's an instrument that we can put in place that restricts that to remain, give some certainty to the residents. If there's some, agreement, leeway, that has to be maintained in perpetuity at the cost of themselves or their, however many people come after them, that would, I think, might go some way to making things, for me anyways, a little more fair. If the residents want a fence, I would just say, that could complicate maintaining the vegetative area, so, think about that. The other thing I would say is those items about raising the road and all that other stuff. I mean, if the ZBA is interested in pursuing that, that's fine, but if there's a certain amount of dollars that are committed to that, I would rather see those dollars committed to something, whether it be, in the capital improvement program that we might be needing. I mean, we just had the police folks in here, and they seem to have some needs. Whether it's a donation, if we end up building a new safety complex, it would be nice to have some money there for equipment, things like that, because that doesn't come cheap, nor do we want it to be cheap. Those type of things are what I'm thinking of. I'm not specifically saying all those things have to be, for those intended purposes, but I would say, and again, it's up to the rest of the board, because we need 3 votes, but.
Just to that point on the road, it's been raised a few times, and I think it was raised by Mr. Corain as well. I think it's a missed point. This is a private way. We say right in the agreement, the town has no authority over a private way. And full disclosure, I think it's for flood insurance, for the developer. Really, where you look to it is that in their comprehensive permit, all right, they must address in detail how it will impact the private rights of abutters. So that was really what was sought to be put in the agreement, so that they would address it with the state to make sure that those abutters who could be directly impacted and possibly have, if drainage calculations were wrong or if things didn't work out, that they had more watershed onto their land. That's what was the intent here. It's not just we negotiated for a road, because I would agree with that statement. I don't necessarily see what benefit the town gets there, especially where it would remain a private way. But again, we got some protections for the neighbors or for the abutters there.
So through the chair, my bigger concern is the developer is clear that this is moving forward, whether or not we approve it or not. And I think I would rather approve it with what we have in place than allow it to go to the state and not have control over what may happen. The state may say you don't have to do anything for abutters. And then, so we kind of it's kind of a tough situation, but I feel like there's the opportunity that we would lose out on a lot that we have gained by going through this process.
I would agree with that statement. Seeing the public come in here, seeing the push against this project, you know, I've never once said my opinion on the project, whether I think it's viable, what might be, this doesn't really matter. To Sarah's point, can I make this project better for the residents of this town? That was my only intent here. Never to think that, you know, it's been said that if you approve this, the state automatically approves it. If you don't approve it, the state will automatically, that's not how any of these matters work. And what we have control over at this point in time is, do we want to mitigate the impacts for the residents? Whether it gets approved by the state, whether the developer runs into snags at the Conservation Commission or the ZBA, we don't have that control. So I don't know what that adds to the conversation, but I really think it needs to be said.
Well, I would say this as a reasonable person, which I hear in law circles, they love to use that.
It's a good standard.
If you're a reasonable person and you get a piece of mail from the proponent to the project and they say, I have absolutely every right to do whatever I want, how is that protecting the residents? That's not protecting them, because they're still going to have to go out and hire a lawyer to say the state is wrong, or they're wrong, or however, which, so to me, that's a civil matter, which really the town shouldn't necessarily even step into, because now you've got a precedent that you're saying, this is it, and at the end of the day, it's going to be an attorney that isn't in the employ of these folks saying, absolutely. I mean, absolutely, they have the right to do what they want. I'm not a lawyer, I don't pretend to be a lawyer, but, you know, as a general person, I'm not gonna take their word for it, that they can just come in and do whatever the hell they want to the road, because, hey, they bought something at the end. And meanwhile, whatever improvements they make, these guys are on the hook to keep the road in a certain condition. I mean, I don't see that as a benefit to the people who live on that street. So that's why I'm saying, if there are dollars attached to this, you know, I'm not saying I'm against it or for it. I'm just trying to, if the question is there room for movement? Potentially, but again, this was presented to the board as we're saving the taxpayers' money. We're not saving the taxpayers' money. There's nothing in here that's saving us money, save $20,000 over a 5-year, which we wouldn't appropriate if we didn't have it anyway. So I'm all in favor of the donation. I'm not saying that, but that isn't what we advertised, I guess. So that's my concern. And, you know, the residents, you know, we had somebody else come in not too long ago saying the same thing. Well, nobody wants people, you know, building. I was on the planning board for 11 years. That is not what I got out of the countless residents who came in. They want to understand the process, they want to understand how this is going to impact their life. They fully respect the fact that the developer has the right to develop their property. But they have concerns, and I don't see in here where we've addressed their concerns. So that's my second, you know, or third or fourth or whatever the heck we're at this point. So that's what I'm saying is, if we're going to do this, which I'm not saying I'm going to vote for it even if we can do this, it's got to show what we're going to get for the people on Perry Street, which, whatever that may be, and whatever we get, it's not going to be enough, because this is not something that they want. And I understand that. But again, I don't read those in the same way that you two do, and that could just be a want of imagination on my part. So, you know, I certainly respect both of you and your opinions on that, but again, I just don't see it in the document, and, you know, get something for nothing. I mean, I'm just, again, this is your signature on a document. This is going to be, I just spent like a week or two going over old minutes trying to find something about Pinehurst Ave, which wasn't there. So, you know, we take and we hold a position of public trust. That does mean something. When we put our signature on things, that means something. It binds our community. to doing something. So I do take that very seriously, and I know everybody up here does as well. So I'm not saying that as in any way that anybody else is doing that. Everybody's trying to do what they think is in the best interest of the town, and I fully respect that. But again, I don't see anything in here that we're saving the taxpayers. I just don't. So,
I don't know that signing off on this says that the other boards aren't going to do their due diligence. Despite us signing off on approving it, the other boards have to do their jobs too.
I'm not even talking about them, I'm talking about us. I'm just saying, in general, ZBA has their prerogatives, and I have every faith that they're going to do their due diligence. That's not my concern. My concern is, when we started the process, we said we were going to save taxpayers' money. I don't see where we're saving taxpayers' money. I don't see where we're making that street more safe. To a degree, just like on Pinehurst Ave. For the fire truck to go up and come back, that's great. But for people who are living on that road, how do they get their kids safely to where they want to go? You know, there's vehicular safety, and then there's pedestrian safety.
All right,
So
well, oh, sorry.
So I guess, just to a couple points. Obviously, the water connection, that's a very expensive deal. I mean, I think when we initially agreed to it, I think we thought that it was going to be somewhere in the $300,000 to $400,000 range. I think it's probably the $500,000 to $700,000 range. And, I know that there was some pushback whether that was a private, the water district, I guess, is a private thing. It has nothing necessarily to do with the town, but obviously, everybody that's in the town, I think, well, so like 80 to 90% of the people that are in the town use that water district. I guess there is another water district. So, but the majority of the town does use that. And obviously, speaking with Jim Woods, and I believe he even sent a letter to the town too, to let everybody know that really is a big benefit to, I know that maybe not as the tax base, it's not a big benefit, but obviously everybody's water is going to be going up if we didn't do that, right? So there is a benefit there, and it is a big dollar figure for us. I think that knowing, like I said to Jim, I said I wish we agreed to a number rather than a scope of work, because that was foolish on our part, but benefit to them. And then as far as the roadway and everything goes, it's a pretty tough road. It's not in great shape. Obviously, we would be widening it and paving it, so there is a benefit to them as far as that goes. So you would be benefiting, the people right there, and then obviously the town would get the benefit of that water. Everybody's water bill would not be going up by the $700,000 or whatever we're going to be paying. And then we did agree to it, obviously the $20,000 for 5 years, so it's $100,000, obviously $20,000 per year. If you wanted to, obviously, I'm open to landscaping as far as if you wanted to put something in there as far as us maintaining it and whatnot. Obviously, we're open to that. And then I think your other question was it sidewalks? Sorry, I wanted to kind of narrow it down to like exactly what you were saying. So if it's the sidewalks, again, we'd have no issue with if the ZBA and DPW and everybody said, maybe one sidewalk on one side and then widen the road, or two sidewalks, or really however they wanted to. No issue with that. We have a certain width that we can widen to, so obviously a sidewalk would pull into that.
Of course.
So if that's something that, you wanted us to put language to, and then, if there was other items that you wanted me to put a dollar figure at and say, well, if we don't do this, then the town would get X. No issue with that either.
Yeah, well, that sounds good, except for that's not helping them. So that's at the end of the road. Now, my understanding is you have to connect to this waterway. So that isn't a benefit to the town, because as part of you doing what you want to do right now, you need to commit to that.
So, obviously not, I'm not going to argue the fact with as far as what we would or would not have to do. To my understanding, after that, there is no moratorium in the town saying that we cannot extend water to my location and to feed my lot. And the town or whoever not having the capability of providing water, to my understanding, after the fact, is really not our issue. So if we did go to the state, then we wouldn't necessarily need to do that, because nothing, there's no bylaw saying you cannot connect to it. And if the town didn't have the water to provide to it, it really would be more of a town issue than our issue.
That is my understanding as well from the
Yeah.
water department.
Yes, well, we're not the water district. That's their responsibility.
Well,
They're
when
elected.
you say ratepayers, taxpayers and a benefit,
Would.
I think the question's been answered.
Yes.
Well, I have my point of view, you have yours.
Absolutely.
So, again, I mean, if it's what's here and this is all you're offering, it's not enough for me to say, yes, I'm gonna sign my name to this, because again, I don't think I think most of these things you're going to have to do anyways, and, again, it's not because we had a room full of people, it's not because I'm indecisive, it's because at the end of the day, we advertised, and I don't see where we're delivering. So that's, I guess, my final word.
All right, so, again, one more, it's just, it doesn't even matter, but it was mitigating mitigating the impacts of the project. The taxpayer benefit, you can go back and prove me wrong in meeting minutes, but the standard is to mitigate the impacts of the project. It's nothing to do with taxes. So that said, do we want to go forward? Right now, it seems like we have some more language to the screening, possibly one idea I wrote down is deed restrictions to make sure that the trees, stay in place and that they be replaced. That would run with the land. Occupancy permit for number 10 versus full occupancy, the issuance of the occupancy permit, that's a simple edit. And would you guys want to see sidewalks if required by ZBA, or do you want to have a commitment to sidewalks in the agreement?
There needs to be a commitment to the sidewalks.
If required by the ZBA, don't you think that's fair?
I think there needs to be a commitment to the sidewalk.
Okay.
My concern with that would be that if the fire department thought they needed the extra space on the road, while I like the idea of sidewalks, I would defer to fire.
Okay.
So, through the chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Everything that I've asked for has pretty much been told that we can't ask for it here. So what are we getting in this agreement, except for our approval, which goes to the other boards? And yes, I fully expect them to do their work, but why do we look like we're supporting it when everything that I know I've asked for has been poo-pooed by rules, regulations, whatever? It doesn't sound like, even in this conversation, if the sidewalks are in there and they're not going to move forward, I think Mr. Carpenter was asking for some sort of offset. If you're not going to move forward with that, what else does the town get? But I did make a motion, and I don't know if we want to, there was a second, I don't know if that's going to move forward or what, but
All right, just restate the motion, please.
I make a motion that we do not sign the LIP agreement.
Okay, and that was second. I just wanted from my purpose, sorry.
I seconded for discussion.
You did. You did.
It's a protected second.
All right, all those in favor?
Are you backing out, or?
No, I'm going to let the chair do what the chair would like to do.
All right, so there was a motion to not sign the,
Aye. Yep.
okay. All those, and that was seconded by, for vote as well?
Sure.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Aye. Okay, that does not, do we have any further motions?
I guess I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, seeing none, do we want to go forward with as far as I see it, the 3 items that you'd like to see changed? And again, now's the time. Is there any further edits, further concerns that you have to the agreement?
Well, I think, for me anyways, at any time, we should be able to let the town manager know if we have something that we've discovered or we would like to have added. At this particular moment, I can't think of anything that I'm,
Yep. Mr. Chambers had done the same thing, which, thank you for doing that.
So I would just recommend that we give this 2 weeks. We don't ask the developer back. We have a conversation, see if we, as a board, can come to some agreement. And then if we can, then we can go back to the developer. His time is valuable as well. So let's hash it out at that point. If we have any further questions, we can talk with the town manager, and I'm sure he will do his best to get us the answers that we can.
And would
That
you-
would be my recommendation.
Would you like to see the developer amend as far as the screening and you mentioned that you wanted the trees to stay in place or be replaced should they need be? Obviously, the occupancy permit, that verbiage we can change and we'll work on some sidewalk language for you guys?
Yeah, I don't want us to do anything until we come back and we have 2 weeks, we ask our questions, and we can have a conversation. If we can agree to what's gonna be here, then we can ask the developer to come back and see if he is agreeable to what it is we want, and we'll make an attempt to do what we can.
Okay, so it sounds like we're gonna hold this matter for now, and I will, through the town manager, ask that he update you once we put it back on the agenda for a potential vote.
Okay, all right, that sounds good.
Thank you.
I have a bunch of the agreements and exhibits and everything. Do you want them? I'm just gonna throw them away anyway. I don't
No,
know if
we
you
got
guys
the-
want-
we're
you got
given the
by
copies,
11s,
yeah.
by 17s, whatever, if you want them, great, if not, I'm just
Why don't we keep them for the office in case any of the residents would like to view them? And maybe we can ask the town clerk if she wouldn't mind hosting them as well.
totally up to you.
So that she can, in case the residents would like a closer view.
Sorry.
Have I missed anything?
I don't think so, I think we're good.
Okay. I feel like I missed something.
All right, thank you, board.
Thank you. All right, moving on, we have no tabled items, so moving on to agenda item 8A, and that was to have the town manager look into the establishment of an agricultural committee of 7 members to review current bylaws.
Mr. Chairman, the chair and the vice chair did reach out to me a week ago Monday, in the night of the volunteer recognition event. They didn't have a quorum, so they weren't able to discuss it. It is my understanding they're scheduled to meet a week from tonight, although it's a holiday, so I don't know if it carries on to the next day or whether it gets postponed for another week or two. So I don't know what their position is. I don't know if they're willing to take it on or whether or not they would suggest that we establish our own and then have them report back to the bylaw committee.
Okay. All right, so we'll table
So
this
I'll
matter
await
for
some
now.
additional guidance from them and report back to the board.
Okay. All right, no minutes to review, so do we have a motion to adjourn?
Can I just ask?
Yes.
All right.
And just to say thank you to the town manager, the assistant town manager, the chair, and the, Mr. Chambers, as well as everybody who came to the event. It was wonderful.
Yes.
I think it was probably the best we've had, and it was wonderful to get to participate in it, so. I
Thank you for putting
everybody-
that on. That was a really good event. Went well, and you put a lot of work into that, so thank you. All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. It's a vote. Good meeting, guys.